You're all welcome to today's News Deep Analysis. This is not noise. This is not rumor. This is one of the most serious legal moments in Nigeria right now. If you care about justice, law, and Nigeria's image before the world, watch this video till the end. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on your notification, because stories like this move fast, and the truth matters. Now let's get straight into it. On 20th of November, Nnamdi Kanu was sentenced to life imprisonment. Not years. Not decades. Life. Shortly after that judgment, he was moved to Sokoto prison. The ruling came from the Federal High Court, under Justice Omotosho. The charges were serious. The punishment was heavy. And the reaction across Nigeria, and beyond, was intense. From the moment the judgment was announced, it became a major national issue. It was discussed in homes, offices, courtrooms, and online spaces. Legal experts began reviewing the ruling. Civil society groups raised concerns. Political observers followed every detail closely. This was not treated as an ordinary court decision. It was seen as a judgment with deep legal and national weight. The court found Nnamdi Kanu guilty on terrorism-related charges and imposed the maximum punishment available under the law. A life sentence is not common in Nigeria's legal system, and that fact alone placed this case in a special category. Many Nigerians immediately began asking questions about the process, the reasoning of the court, and the implications of such a sentence. Following the conviction, prison authorities transferred Nnamdi Kanu to Sokoto prison. That transfer also became part of public discussion, as it marked a clear shift in his custody status after the judgment. From that point, the case moved from trial stage into a new legal phase. It is important to state clearly that sentencing does not end a legal process. In Nigeria, as in most legal systems, conviction at a trial court does not remove a defendant's constitutional rights. One of those rights is the right to appeal. This right exists to allow higher courts review decisions made by lower courts. White right pointing backhand index every convicted person has a legal right to appeal. This is not sympathy. This is law. The Nigerian Constitution and criminal procedure laws provide that a person who believes a judgment is flawed, unfair, or wrongly decided may approach the Court of Appeal. This applies regardless of the offense or the sentence imposed. The appeal system exists to protect the integrity of the justice process. In this case, Nnamdi Kanu exercised that right. He filed a notice of appeal challenging the decision of the Federal High Court. This document formally informed the Court of Appeal and the federal government that the judgment was being contested. The appeal does not operate on emotion or public opinion. It is based strictly on legal grounds. These include issues related to how the trial was conducted, how evidence was treated, and how the sentence was imposed. The appeal also raises questions about whether the court followed proper legal procedures before arriving at a life sentence. One of the major points raised in the appeal is that the trial court allegedly failed to consider relevant legal factors before imposing sentence. Another issue relates to procedural fairness and whether the defendant was given full opportunity under the law. These are standard legal arguments used in appellate courts across Nigeria. By filing the appeal, the case automatically moved into a new legal jurisdiction. The Court of Appeal in Abuja now has the responsibility to review the entire record of proceedings from the trial court. This includes the charges, the evidence, the judgment, and the sentence. At this stage, the conviction is not final. The law recognizes that appellate courts have the power to affirm, reduce, vary, or completely overturn decisions of lower courts. This is why appeals are considered a critical part of justice administration. The filing of the appeal also means that the life sentence is now under judicial review. Until the Court of Appeal reaches a decision, the legal arguments remain open. This is why legal analysts emphasize that the case is still active and unresolved. It is also important to understand that appealing a judgment does not mean disrespect for the court. Appeals are part of the legal structure. Judges themselves expect their decisions to be reviewed where necessary. This system strengthens the rule of law and promotes accountability within the judiciary. As the appeal process begins, attention naturally shifts from the trial court to the appellate court. Legal timelines, court schedules, and procedural steps now determine the pace of the case. Every filing, response, and hearing becomes part of the official judicial record. This phase marks a turning point. The sentence has been passed, but the law has not finished speaking. The appeal ensures that the issues raised by the conviction will be examined again, this time by a higher court with constitutional authority to reassess the entire matter. That is where the case stands at this point: a life sentence delivered, a prison transfer completed, and a formal appeal now before the Court of Appeal, setting the stage for the next legal developments. The situation took a new and more serious turn when information emerged that the African Union was preparing to get directly involved. This development immediately shifted the conversation from a purely domestic legal matter to an issue attracting continental attention. The African Union is not known for casual involvement in national court cases, so its decision to follow this appeal closely carries strong meaning. According to available information, the African Union is set to send a panel to Nigeria to monitor and follow up on the appeal proceedings involving Nnamdi Kanu. The focus of this panel is not political negotiation and not public statements, but observation of the legal process itself. Their role is centered on monitoring how the appeal is handled, how procedures are followed, and whether established legal standards are respected throughout the process. This move places Nigeria's judiciary under a wider lens. When a continental body like the African Union steps in, it signals that the case has implications beyond one individual. It becomes a matter of legal standards, human rights considerations, and institutional credibility. The presence of an external observer does not interfere with the court's authority, but it adds a layer of accountability that cannot be ignored. The African Union panel is expected to follow the proceedings at the Court of Appeal in Abuja, where Nnamdi Kanu's appeal is currently pending. Their interest is tied to ensuring that due process is followed from start to finish. This includes how filings are treated, how hearings are conducted, and how decisions are reached. The panel's mandate is to observe, document, and report. At the same time, it has been confirmed that Justice Omotosho, the trial judge who issued the life sentence, remains under investigation by the African Union panel. This investigation is not a declaration of wrongdoing. It is a review process aimed at examining judicial conduct and compliance with legal and human rights standards. Such reviews are part of broader mechanisms used by international and regional bodies to assess justice systems across member states. This dual development, monitoring the appeal and reviewing the conduct of the trial judge, has intensified public and legal interest in the case. Legal analysts have pointed out that this level of attention is unusual and reflects the seriousness with which the African Union views the matter. It also underscores concerns raised by rights groups regarding fair trial standards and sentencing practices. Nigeria, as a member of the African Union, is subject to its legal and human rights frameworks. While Nigerian courts operate independently, the country has commitments under regional and international agreements. The African Union's involvement reminds all parties that national decisions can carry wider consequences within Africa's legal community. The monitoring panel is expected to act professionally and quietly, without disrupting court proceedings. Their work is largely observational, but their findings can influence future discussions, recommendations, and reports at the continental level. This makes every step in the appeal process significant, not just for the parties involved, but for Nigeria's standing in broader legal circles. Government officials have not publicly opposed the monitoring effort, and there has been no indication that the Court of Appeal will alter its procedures as a result. However, the presence of observers naturally increases pressure on institutions to adhere strictly to established rules. Transparency, fairness, and procedural correctness become even more critical under such conditions. This development also changes how the appeal is perceived by the public. What might have remained a domestic legal debate has now taken on international relevance. For supporters and critics alike, the case is no longer viewed in isolation. It is being measured against wider standards of justice and accountability. The African Union's interest sends a clear message: the outcome of this appeal will be closely watched, documented, and remembered. It reinforces the idea that high-profile cases can shape perceptions of an entire justice system. For Nigeria, this moment represents both a challenge and an opportunity to demonstrate commitment to the rule of law. As the appeal process moves forward, the involvement of the African Union ensures that developments will continue to attract attention beyond Nigeria's borders. Court decisions, procedural steps, and judicial conduct will all be assessed within a broader framework. This is now a case unfolding under continental observation, where every action carries weight and every decision matters. This appeal now stands at the center of a wider legal and institutional test. What is before the Court of Appeal is not only the fate of one individual, but the strength of the legal process itself. Appeals exist to correct possible errors, review decisions carefully, and ensure that justice is not only done, but seen to be done. This stage is where the law speaks again, calmly and deliberately. Nnamdi Kanu's appeal challenges the judgment that sent him to prison for life. The appeal documents ask the Court of Appeal to look closely at how the trial was conducted, how conclusions were reached, and how the sentence was imposed. These requests are grounded in legal principles, not public pressure or political emotion. The court is required to examine the record of proceedings line by line. At the appeal level, the judges are not witnesses and they do not retry the case in the usual sense. Their role is to review whether the law was properly applied and whether the defendant's rights were respected throughout the trial. If errors are found, the court has the authority to correct them. This authority is a core part of Nigeria's judicial structure. One key issue raised by the appeal is whether proper legal procedures were followed before the life sentence was imposed. Sentencing is not meant to be automatic. Courts are expected to consider relevant factors before deciding punishment. When these steps are questioned, appellate courts are duty-bound to review them carefully and objectively. Another central issue is whether the trial met the standard of fairness required under the Constitution and applicable laws. Fairness in this context refers to equal treatment, opportunity to respond, and adherence to established rules. These are not optional standards. They are fundamental principles that guide every serious court process. The appeal also brings attention to the broader question of judicial accountability. Judges operate independently, but independence exists alongside responsibility. When appellate courts review lower court decisions, they help maintain balance within the justice system. This process protects both the courts and the public. With the African Union monitoring the proceedings, the appeal takes on additional significance. This does not change the law, but it increases attention to how the law is applied. It reinforces the expectation that procedures will be followed strictly, without shortcuts or irregularities. The presence of observers highlights the importance of transparency at every stage. As the appeal progresses, legal arguments will be exchanged through formal filings and court sessions. Each side will present its position based on law and precedent. The court will consider these arguments carefully, guided by statutes, case law, and constitutional provisions. This is a structured process, governed by rules that apply to all cases before the Court of Appeal. The outcome of the appeal remains uncertain. The court may uphold the conviction, modify the sentence, or set aside the judgment entirely. These possibilities exist within the legal framework, and none can be assumed in advance. What matters most is that the decision will come after review, not assumption. This moment also has implications beyond the courtroom. How the appeal is handled will influence public trust in the justice system. Confidence in courts depends not on outcomes alone, but on fairness, clarity, and adherence to the law. A transparent appeal process helps reinforce that confidence. For Nigeria, this appeal is being watched as a measure of institutional strength. It presents an opportunity to demonstrate respect for legal rights, judicial review, and due process. The way the courts manage this case will contribute to how Nigeria's legal system is viewed across Africa. As proceedings continue, updates will emerge through official court actions rather than speculation. The appeal process is deliberate by design, allowing careful consideration rather than rushed conclusions. This patience is part of justice, even when emotions run high. In the end, the Court of Appeal will speak through its judgment. That judgment will represent the law as interpreted by the court, based on the facts and arguments presented. Until then, the appeal remains active, the scrutiny remains firm, and the legal process moves forward step by step. As the appeal continues, attention remains fixed on how the court manages each stage of the process. The Court of Appeal is expected to follow established timelines, allow all parties proper representation, and ensure that every submission is given due consideration. These steps may appear procedural, but they form the backbone of a credible justice system. The federal government, as the respondent, is also expected to respond formally to the grounds of appeal. This response will address the legal issues raised and defend the judgment of the trial court. The exchange of legal arguments between both sides is a standard part of appellate review and allows the court to assess the case from all angles. Observers note that high-profile appeals often move cautiously, especially when complex legal questions are involved. The court must balance speed with accuracy, knowing that its decision will carry lasting consequences. Rushed judgments can weaken confidence, while careful review strengthens institutional trust. The continued interest of the African Union reinforces the importance of procedural discipline. Every filing, hearing, and ruling contributes to a broader assessment of how justice is administered. This external attention does not dictate outcomes, but it does highlight the expectation of strict compliance with legal norms. Public discussion around the appeal remains active, but the final outcome will depend solely on the court's interpretation of the law. Courts are insulated from public pressure by design, allowing judges to focus on legal reasoning rather than sentiment. This separation is essential to the credibility of the judicial process. Until a judgment is delivered, the appeal remains unresolved. What is clear is that the process itself has become a reference point for broader conversations about law, rights, and accountability in Nigeria. The manner in which this appeal is concluded will likely influence future legal debates and institutional reforms. For now, all parties await the court's next steps. The appeal continues within the framework of the law, under observation, and with implications that extend beyond the immediate case.